Hey, ladies. Kerry, Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have both of you. We don't normally have three people on, but I'm excited to have a party, a FemTech party.
Absolutely. Me too.
Are you both in Canada?
Yes. Different sides of the country.
Oh,
Yes.
One of you's on the east, one's on the west.
Yep.
I'm based in Toronto.
And I'm in Vancouver.
Is there a lot of Canadians in the middle? I feel like I only know Canadians from those two sides.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think they migrate.
If you live in the middle of Canada, reach out to us. I want to hear from you. We do have a lot of Canadian listeners, so that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really excited to talk about this topic. We're going to be talking about concussions, which, y'all reached out to me and said, hey, we think this might be an interesting topic. And honestly, when I was like, oh no, this is a women's health and wellness. And you guys said, well, women actually experience concussions differently. So I am really, really interested to hear some of the science behind that. I think our listeners are going to love that too. We love, FemTech for us is anything that solely, disproportionately, or differently affects women. And so, concussions happen to all genders, but I'm excited to hear today a little bit how it might be different for women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've been working with sports teams across Canada and in the United States, and a lot of our teams have athletes, both genders, same sports, both genders. We have colleges, universities, and we're seeing some interesting trends even within our own populations, our own customer bases. So happy to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot of our FemTech startups say we're pretty much discovering it because there's not enough research. And so we knew there was something happening, but our own company is actually revealing the truth behind it. So I'm really excited. We love to start with the founders' backgrounds. So, our listeners, many of them are aspiring FemTech founders, and they may be studying political science or marketing or, writing, journalism. Everyone has different backgrounds when they come to FemTech. So tell us a little bit of your personal stories, where you're from, what did you study, what did you work on, and then how did you end up here?
Sure. I'll start first. My name is Kerry. I started off this company after, I think, years and years of being involved in sport. I was a coach. I was an athlete myself. And when I was coaching, I came across some athletes who suffered some injuries that I didn't know how to handle. And you go through your first aid training, and sometimes it covers off the injuries that you're exposed to, and sometimes it doesn't. And one of my athletes suffered a concussion during one of our games, and she was out for, I think, the better part of 3 months during the basketball season. And so it was always an incident that stuck with me. I studied psychology and sociology when I was doing my undergrad, and continued on into business. And when I met my co-founder, Harrison, he was studying sensory motor physiology, and his idea was to help map balance and use balance as an objective tool for measuring impacts in concussion testing. And so when those two things came together for me, I kind of felt like I met my maker and started down the path of building a business that could help youth sports and help coaches who were in the same position that I was in.
Cool. And so how long ago did you start HeadCheck?
We started HeadCheck in 2013. We went through product development for a couple of years and launched our product with customers in 2016.
Wow, amazing. And we also have Rebecca on the line. Rebecca, hello. Tell us about
Hi. Okay, so I guess my most relevant background is that I did my master's in bioethics and health law at a school in New Zealand called the University of Otago. And it was there that I studied for my thesis. I wrote about concussion management in professional sport. Now, my interest in concussion is very much like Kerry's, where I've been playing sports since a very young age. I've seen so many people suffering from concussion and just saw there was a mismanagement issue. And I've personally had concussions. I had my first concussion at the age of 8 horseback riding, where I was knocked unconscious. My most recent one was in ultimate frisbee, where it's a non-contact sport, yet here we are. I got elbowed in the back of the head and had another concussion. And so after graduating, I reached out to HeadCheck to see what opportunities were available. And they said, with your background, how about you start writing some blog post content for us? And I jumped at that opportunity because it meant I got to stay updated with the literature and also try to inform people a little bit more about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So listeners, if you are a psychology major, you're a legal professional, you are a physiologist, physical therapist, all of those are roads to FemTech. We're such a diverse group of people. I have yet to meet someone who majored in FemTech. That would be a dream if we can make that program. But until then,
that'd be sick.
So tell us, Kerry, what is HeadCheck Health? So you launched it, 2013, and then 2016 you have customers. So what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we're a software platform that helps organizations manage their concussion protocols and help athletes manage their recovery process. So we basically have an all-encompassing system that allows all of the individuals who are involved in the health and safety management of an athlete to kind of take part, share the information that's relevant to make sure that the athlete's getting the best kind of care on the road to recovery if they suffer an injury.
Okay. Does it include the balance like your co-founder was doing?
Yeah. So we started off with the balance technology, and when we went out to market, we actually interviewed a ton of people, and that's actually how our business was formed, was from all of the feedback that we got, where we heard that the balance technology was great, but there was actually a bigger problem that needed to be addressed, and that was trying to figure out how they could manage all of the paperwork involved in managing athletes and managing athlete health, specifically around concussion and concussion protocols.
Listeners, if you have an idea, you just heard it. The best thing to do is market research. You got to go out and ask people what they actually want, and then you build what they want, right? Because
absolutely,
4 years making a scale that measures your balance, and you went to market and they were like, this is nice, but you got to do that research ahead of time. So let's talk about the biology of a concussion. What is a concussion?
Yeah, Rebecca, do you want to jump on that one?
Sure. So in very simple terms, concussion happens when a person receives an impact to the head or the body. It doesn't have to strictly be the head. Wow. And your brain moves within the skull. And in that process, your brain kind of twists and turns and neurons stretch. And it basically creates this physiological process that results in lower energy, like a lower energy within the brain, which is suspected to cause the symptoms of concussion. And there is also some kind of structural damage in terms of the stretching of the neurons, which can also cause those symptoms. Did I miss anything, Kerry?
No, you're good.
Does the brain swell?
Only if it's like a more serious injury would it swell. So there's something called second impact syndrome, where, if you, and I'll preface this about why it's so important to educate people about proper concussion management, is if I get hit in the head, I think I have a concussion, I'm like, I'm going to keep playing because I don't want to let my teammates down.
Yeah.
Well, and then I receive a second hit to the head, I could actually get second impact syndrome, which is an often fatal swelling of the brain.
Wow.
Yeah, and it typically happens with younger athletes, which is why we really need to educate our, high school, middle school, elementary school athletes, to, when in doubt, sit it out sort of thing.
When in doubt, sit it out. And what are the symptoms of a concussion? How does one know if you have it?
So the most prominent, there are a wide variety of symptoms that range from emotional. So just generally being more emotional can be a symptom, but headache, nausea, dizziness. You don't always have to have a loss of consciousness, but that can, if you do lose consciousness, that can be a symptom. Can certainly be a symptom of that as well.
Why does someone lose consciousness if they get hit in the head?
I actually am not 100% sure on the science behind that question.
Yeah, no worries. I've been known to put my guests on the spot, so don't worry. If you don't know, we'll do the research later. Kerry, do you know why?
My best understanding is that it's a physiological response. Your body's trying to protect itself.
Oh, yeah. Your body's like, oh, hell no. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on, but we should probably lay down.
Yeah, I think we might need to do a fact check on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Okay. Yeah, if you fact check it, I'll include it in the intro and exit for our listeners. Interesting. Sure. Very interesting. So, and then how long do these symptoms last? This like emotional irregulation and the dizziness and stuff?
So they can appear anywhere from immediately after the injury to a couple days afterwards. So that's why it's hard to diagnose a concussion, is that symptoms don't always appear right away. In terms of how long they last, that really depends. Most people will, who suffer from a concussion, will recover within 1 to 4 weeks. And, you know, it might be 7 to 10 days, you're feeling great. And then you can kind of start that return to play process, return to work process. There are some though who, there are some concussed athletes who, you know, their symptoms last a lot longer than 4 weeks, and that's called post-concussive syndrome. And that often requires a little bit more detailed treatment, where you're going to see a concussion expert and they'll refer you to people who will help you with the specific issues you're having.
What is the treatment for concussions?
So the treatment for concussion, basically when you receive a concussion or you suspect that you have one, you want to immediately go to a medical professional and just have them make sure it's not anything serious, and to basically diagnose that you have a concussion. In the following 24 to 48 hours, you want to rest physically and mentally. So that means you're not on your phone, you're not reading. I know when I had a concussion, what I decided to do so I wouldn't be bored was I listened to audiobooks, because you can really mentally strain yourself by doing anything kind of with your eyes. That requires that, you know, looking at a screen or looking at a book. So after the 48 hours, that's when, hopefully when you see your medical professional initially, they'll give you the steps that, like, if you're feeling pretty good, this is what the next steps will be. And that's usually a gradual return to normal life. So maybe the first day you start with doing some laundry and like a light lifting exercise, you know, to lift your laundry basket. And then you're like, okay, I now get 30 minutes of screen time. And your medical professional will help you with that. And it's often very dependent on the individual, and it's what you can take, what your body can take. And if you have any kind of exacerbation of symptoms, you take a step back. And you reduce your exercise and whatnot.
How many concussions happen per year? Or like if whatever kind of statistics are out there, you know, like how prevalent are concussions?
I mean, there's a wide variety of statistics out there. In the US alone, I believe there's about 4.8 million concussions that occur each year that are reported. We do know that there's a wide number of concussions that go unreported. Athletes don't report them, or you get into a motor vehicle accident and there's a more serious injury, so maybe that concussion doesn't get reported. So we believe that number is actually much higher. And in sports specifically, that is not the number one driver of concussion. It's actually motor vehicle accidents and individual activities, slipping in the shower, actually going for a bike ride. I wouldn't necessarily consider that like a team sport event, but it's a sporting event all the same that drives a high number of incidents.
Interesting. All right. Well, I now feel like I know a little bit more about concussions. Let's get into, we are on the FemTech Focus Podcast. So why are we talking about concussions in terms of women? Does it affect women differently? Do women get more concussions? Do our symptoms last longer? Tell me about the relationship between concussions and women.
Yeah, I mean, starting the conversation off, I think I would like to preface the conversation by saying what we know right now is very different from what we knew 20 years ago, when the research was a little bit more directed towards the collegiate male football player, and that was sort of the most common area that was focused for research.
We know all about that at FemTech Focus.
Yeah,
all the standards
absolutely
are based on a white man, so we are not surprised. We are not surprised.
Yeah.
We are re-researching things we've already researched because all the data is based on white men. So, yep, we're on the same page, and we're annoyed, but we're here.
You know what? I think it's a great place to start. You've got to have a sort of a base case in order to build your knowledge base. And they started expanding all the sports, and then they started looking at gender specific focus. And I think, as Rebecca will probably mention in a moment, concussion rates among women are higher. When you look at same sports, concussion rates are higher. Women are more likely to have a reported incident or reported injury. And without taking away all of Rebecca's thunder, I believe it also takes them longer to recover. So Rebecca, I know you've been doing a ton of research in this area. Maybe you can add some color to what I've said there.
Yes. So I 100% agree with you, Kerry. We have this background of knowledge that's so useful, but really only to a subset of our population. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, research on females with concussion is increasing dramatically. And a recent blog post that I wrote was based on actually a study published in 2003, so almost 20 years ago. So this research isn't new. What we're finding isn't new, but it's coming to the forefront because someone has decided that this is now important, which is great. Mm-hmm. So, Kerry, you've mentioned the three top things. Women often have a higher injury rate. So in one study, it was almost 2 times as many concussions with females than with males. Mm. You also have females having more severe symptoms. Now, there's been some interesting studies on kind of why that is. There have been some studies that show that women are not more educated, but that they're more willing to use their knowledge on concussion symptoms to report those symptoms. And like, oh yes, I know that the X, Y, and Z are concussion symptoms. I have these 3 things. Whereas males might not be as forward to do so, and that also has some stigma issues. One of the reasons why males don't report concussion is because they don't want to be judged, which is unfortunate.
Yes.
And then the final thing is that it typically takes longer for females to recover. And I think we're now in that stage where we researchers have seen that females are impacted by concussion differently, and now they're trying to figure out why. Mm-hmm. So we're now into that stage where it's like, is it the menstrual cycle? Is it hormones? Is it a weaker neck, like weaker neck muscles? So that's all starting to be explored now.
Oh my gosh, I have a bunch of questions. So, you said, it's like 2x of the concussions are women compared to men. Is that because you also said that there's like this reporting issue, right? And so let's pretend that all the men reported their concussions at the same rate that women do you think that it would be that we're at the same level of concussions, or that women truly, like, even if we're all reporting it well, like for both genders, that women do get more concussions than men? And you can guess, or you could tell me you have no idea. I'm just asking.
I think there is enough research to show that females are definitely impacted more. And the unreporting rate is I would say, maybe I wasn't clear. It's like, I think similar between the sexes, but it's more that like when you report a concussion, men will be like, I only have a headache. It's fine. Whereas females will say, oh, I have a headache. I have some nausea and I'm emotional.
Got it. Okay.
And I think building on that, the other component that may play a factor in that is that the access to medical professionals at the sideline may be different by gender. I think traditionally you see a lot of medical professionals for sports like football and even men's soccer at the college level and the high school level are more likely to have access to regular full-time athletic trainers or athletic therapists. That is only just starting to happen now, I think, on the female sports side. And even within hockey in Canada here, we see a disparity or a difference in the education level of the people who are the team trainers or the team therapists. And I think that may actually also play a role, although it's maybe not being researched extensively. I think that could be a contributing factor.
This is interesting because this is like so much biology and neuroscience research, but this is also so much sociology. This is so much sociology that has to do with women being more in their bodies potentially and more aware of their symptoms and being able to articulate those symptoms compared to men. Mm-hmm. Women, I don't know, maybe they're coaches their entire lives, these women, if they're a professional female soccer player, her whole life she may have had coaches and trainers that allowed her potentially to be more open about her injuries. And maybe a man had coaches and trainers their whole life, or dads or moms that said, just tough up, you're a man, like you're not hurt. I wonder, oh my God, so much of this is also like how we live our lives in different genders.
Yeah, I think that may also be playing a role. I think as society changes, we may see some changes in the behaviors and attitudes from both genders. And I know, I remember, oh gosh, it must have been about 4 years ago, there was a very poignant moment in professional sports history in my mind where Sidney Crosby actually removed himself from play. And so we're starting to see those male athletes accept and be more, I guess, willing to self-report those incidents. But it's going to take a social change to make it all happen and for the betterment of the athletes.
Definitely. There's been several documentaries on Netflix of different football players with, I forget the acronym. Is it ICE? Am I saying that wrong? What is the acronym of, like, you have a lot of concussions and it affects your long-term behavior?
So it's called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
I don't know where I got ICE from. I don't know where I got CTE, yeah. Wow. Tell me more about that. What is CTE?
Yeah, so CTE is basically a chronic condition that we are currently seeing with typically pro football players, hockey players, and some soccer players. But again, the focus has been on these male professional athletes. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of an example you can point to where, like, oh, we're only focusing on male athletes at this point. Yeah. And basically it is a neurodegenerative condition where it's not necessarily because you've had too many concussions. It's possible that it's just the subconcussive impacts that are basically causing your brain to degenerate. And it has a bunch of symptoms, very briefly. So like Alzheimer's or dementia of any kind, mm-hmm. anger issues or emotional issues, ALS, memory, mm-hmm. just, it's not a good thing. And basically what we've seen with the football players and the hockey players and whatnot is that it does happen at quite a young age where, normally dementia hits you a little bit later on in life. This is happening to 50 or 60-year-olds.
Yeah. Interesting. We know that women get Alzheimer's more than men. And for many years, we've always just said, well, women live longer. And someone finally ran the numbers and they were like, it doesn't add up. Even when women live longer, like the fact that two out of three, people with Alzheimer's are women, like it doesn't add up. So I can imagine that even if we get the social stigma straightened out and men are allowed to say that they're not well, and their, environment is encouraging them to take it easy and report and all that stuff, that it is truly that women's brains, are different. We're different because obviously there's these other brain things, brain health things that affect women's brains differently than men's brains.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. I know with the focus on CTE from about 2009, 2011 onward, I think we've seen quite a lot of media coverage around that. That's really helped drive education for a lot of families and sort of the common person, as it were, people who were not necessarily exposed to concussions before, or who didn't know to take it as seriously as maybe we are now.
Yeah.
And I think we're also starting to see with the proliferation of this content, the equality or the drive towards equality of women in sport, and also the women research on women in sport. And we're seeing trends that are happening. I think actually, even within the CTE community, there's actually female athletes now donating their brains in future to the research, so that we can do some research on female brains when the time comes. And it's one of those research studies you have to do after you've passed. So they're donating it in advance with the hope of a long lifespan and hopefully no Alzheimer's.
I have donated my brain.
Yeah.
Have you? That's awesome.
That's so cool. Oh my God. How do I sign up for that?
There's a couple of different ways. I think there's a couple concussion foundations that you can participate with. There's also, of course, your organ donation.
Will that qualify me? Because I'm an organ donor. So will that qualify my brains going to research too?
You can specify organs to go to certain areas, yes.
Cool. Yeah.
At least in Canada. I actually don't know how it works in the States.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if
of that.
Totally messed that up. So I'm going to check it out, and who knows, maybe if I live really, really long, I'll just go to Canada to make sure that the brain goes to the right place.
Come on up.
What's women, because with CTE and concussions, I think ice hockey for men, I think American football, right? What are the women's sports where they could potentially be getting CTE? What high contact sports women get most of their concussions in?
So that would be women's soccer has quite high concussion rates. Women's basketball, which is surprising, I don't know. And then not enough research has been done on this from what I can tell, but I would say women's rugby would be probably the highest one for that CTE risk, because you might not be getting concussions, but you're definitely having that impact when you're tackling.
Constant impact, yeah.
I also read that female lacrosse also has really, really high rates. They have a higher likelihood to suffer a concussion in a game than men playing lacrosse.
Wow.
I wonder if it applies to field hockey as well.
Do you think women are we actually more aggressive, or what's up with that?
Biased answer from playing basketball against guys versus girls. Yeah, I think we're a little bit more fierce, with our bodies. We've got the hip checks going on and whatnot.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Biased answer though, fully biased answer. What do you think? I mean, you played sports growing up, right?
I mean, I played field hockey because I was way too aggressive for basketball. I always fouled out. They were like, Brittany, you need to stop hitting people. That's not how you play basketball. So I found field hockey and found my my spot. But I actually got a concussion playing softball. I was, we were warming up, and it was high school, and passing the ball back and forth, and I wasn't paying attention. I thought my partner wasn't going to throw it. She threw it, hit my eye. And it was I was really confused and lightheaded and high for 30 minutes. And then I had this really bad black eye, and I don't remember if they diagnosed me with a concussion or not, which probably means they did.
Yes. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about where I want to see HeadCheck go. I think, when you're dealing with athletes who have concussion, regardless of gender, there's always that potential that they aren't aware of what their next step is supposed to be, or what they can or can't do, whether they should take more naps or take less naps because they're feeling more fatigued. And I'd like to be able to provide something that allows them or gives them the tools that they need in order to know where they are at, what they need to do next, what they can and can't do, and make it more accessible for everybody who's trying to help take care of them, so that they can communicate, so that if a diagnosis does happen, there's a record of it. Yeah. And then 4 years later, if unfortunately, you suffer another concussion playing ultimate frisbee, then you have a record of what happened last time, what symptoms you were experiencing, and how that plays a role in your current situation, and if there's maybe any confounding variables that impact that.
Yeah, luckily podcasting is a pretty safe profession, so
knock on wood there.
Putting you on the spot here, quick question. Concussion in my mind is like a minor form of a brain injury, right? But when it comes to traumatic brain injury, so like real deal, like brain is swollen, there's damage. Do we know any statistics around if that women have longer recovery times for traumatic brain injuries? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but just wondering.
I don't know any of that information off the top of my head. I could definitely take a look and get back to you.
I'm signing you a lot of homework. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's interesting stuff. I love looking into it anyway. So I think, Rebecca, have you done any research in that space? I know it's just a little bit further beyond concussion. It's sort of a brain bleeder. There's like some sort of formal diagnosis. Concussion's a little bit of a black box almost of an injury.
Wow. Exactly. And it's so interesting because they do call concussion a mild traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
But yet when we talk about concussion, we try to encourage people to not use the word minor or mild. Like there's no such thing as like, oh, I had a really severe concussion or I had a mild concussion. Like every concussion is important. And is significant. So, but yes, to actually answer your question, it's just a little bit outside talking about like a major traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, totally.
Is a bit outside my scope.
Interesting. Well, if any of our listeners, if you're a neuroscientist studying, legit traumatic brain injuries, hit us up. We are interested in women's brains, that get rattled around. We want to know.
Absolutely.
How can we help women recover from TBIs? What is the future for HeadCheck Health? What are some of your future goals?
Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to where I want to go with the platform for athletes. We're working right now to try and incorporate the guardians or the parents of athletes. There's a lot of reporting that can happen by parents, especially of youth athletes. They play a really important role. We know how important, our I call it the mom factor, the protective nature of parents are. And I think that there's a lot that we can do for the future of athletes and youth, I think, especially with the confounding variables of concussion or the compounding variables of concussion. We want to make a tool easier for clinicians really at the end of the day. And so we're going to do whatever we can to make this whole process a little bit easier for everybody involved, whether it's an athlete or a guardian or a clinician, one of the trainers, the sideline, or even the coach who maybe won't have the medical training because it's not covered in their first aid training, but will have access to the tools and then through the system maybe have access to the clinicians that they need access to. And the goal is to try and help provide a better outcome for athletes and help give them that whole record so that if they suffer multiple impacts, they have a record of it and can kind of take it with them, whatever sport they play or whatever level of sport they get to.
Yeah, better documentation. Amazing. Well, we have a lot of aspiring founders that listen to our podcast, and I would like to ask you, what's an area in women's health and wellness that you think still needs innovating?
I've seen some really cool tech in, this is so different from concussion, but pelvic floor training. I've seen a lot of really cool tech in that space recently, just through the network. And, I think being a female founder, you get to know a lot of other female founders. So that's an area that I think I'd like to see a little bit more work in, because I know of a lot of people who suffer from issues, particularly after pregnancy.
Yeah,
so that would be an area.
Because that's what we always hear about we mostly hear about not professional sports people having a baby and then they can't do jumping jacks anymore without peeing themselves. But I can imagine that's legit inconvenient when your job is to do jumping jacks, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. There's a huge, huge trend of mothers in sports and sort of being a mother and playing professional sport. I think last year there was a huge article about a soccer player in the NWSL who had their child basically at the sideline after a game, and she was, I'll find it and flip it over to you. It was a really interesting article, and sort of like the whole perspective around moms in sport. I think that's going to be a trend moving forward, so it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that for sure.
Whoa, that sounds like, I don't know what position she was playing if she was that pregnant.
No. She had the baby with her. She wasn't pregnant when she was playing. Yeah. Just gosh, after on the sideline.
I heard you say, I heard 9-month pregnant woman and the game finished and she gave birth. That's what I heard.
No.
I am a total dreamer here. Fantasy land. Okay, got it. She had
but I think there's like social acceptance around you can be a professional athlete and you can be a mom to a young child, and you can do both things successfully. And I think that is a positive movement.
Absolutely. And what do you think the FemTech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
That's a really good question. I think, given the circumstances of our economy right now, I think giving the voices or the voice to female founders, and particularly female health tech founders, I think that's something that I'd like to see more of. And I think by getting the voice up, we're going to see increased opportunities for people who want to join female-led organizations, female investment, and hopefully in future female investors. I think it's sort of a cyclical event or a cyclical series of events that need to happen in order to see the whole industry bloom. But I think we're starting down the right path and we just need to do more of it.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you ladies so much for this super interesting talk today. Wow. I learned a lot about concussions. My listeners know I'm literally learning on record with them. So thank you so much for what you do, and thanks for the lesson today.
Thanks for having us. It was exciting to be here, and I look forward to hearing all the things that come of this afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.